We continue on with our introduction of Wi-Fi. Let's talk a bit about the history of Wi-Fi. In 1985, a very important ruling was made by the FCC. The FCC is the Federal Communications Commission, and it's a very important organization in the US as far as communications is concerned, and in fact, it has influence over the whole world as well because many other countries also observe carefully and follow some of these developments that happen in the US. So, for example, this important ruling in 1985 was that the FCC allowed the use of some experimental ISM radio bands. What does this mean? Industrial, scientific, and medical. But what's so special about these bands? Well, it's not about the locations of the bands themselves. So let's say like 2.4 gigahertz, 900 megahertz. It's not so much about the locations of these bands, but the way that these bands could be used, because these would be unlicensed. You see, one of the problems with deploying new wireless systems or investigating and experimenting with new wireless technologies is that usually the FCC would be requiring licenses so that you prevent various kinds of interference from happening. Now, sometimes when you want to experiment with things, it's not so convenient to be talking about licenses and that because you're not sure exactly how your communications will be used, and you want to be able to adapt and do things. So, having these unlicensed bands was a great way to enable innovation and trying new things. But it also was a foundation that allowed for Wi-Fi to emerge later on. Well, one thing about these unlicensed bands is that it's not completely chaotic. It's not like the FCC says, okay, within this band you can do anything. Okay, so there are still some rules for these unlicensed bands. The radio transmitters have to play nice. They have to follow certain rules. There's certain limits on the transmissions, but they don't have to go get a license from the FCC in order to be legally transmitting in these bands. So that's a big deal. Anyway, because of that, so wireless LAN systems started to emerge. There, as I mentioned before, various proprietary solutions were developed by private companies even before 802.11 emerged. They did not quite take off because they were not compatible with each other and didn't really get the kind of ecosystem, large, wide-scale ecosystem that you need for something like Wi-Fi to become ubiquitous like we see it today. Anyway, in 1990, then work began within IEEE 802 to specify some kind of solution for wireless local area network. By 1997, the first version of 802.11 was published. It got off to a bit of a slow start, as with many technologies. There were certain flaws and problems and so on. So a revision quickly came out in 1999. But also in 1999, another important thing that happened was the formation of the Wi-Fi Alliance. At that time, it was known as WECA. But as I mentioned before, with the Wi-Fi Alliance having this stamp of approval, it allows compatibility when different devices from different vendors can work together. So then you have Wi-Fi certified labels applied to these devices, and it's an important final piece of the puzzle. Besides the standardization itself, to have this other organization that can help to ensure that vendors' devices are working nicely with each other by following certain things according to the standards. So, as we see in this timeline, wireless LAN, WLAN came first, followed by 802.11. Finally, Wi-Fi, the name Wi-Fi through the Wi-Fi Alliance, that came last, and it was the final piece. And then we had everything that, together with the demand for mobile data, created this situation where things were just in place for this tremendous explosion and growth of Wi-Fi. So there was this exponential growth with, especially at this time, also the increasing popularity of laptop computers. People soon realized that, wow, standardization really made a big difference. It allowed for this interoperability between systems and growth of this whole ecosystem of Wi-Fi devices, access points, and related products. In fact, within a couple of years, cellular operators started feeling threatened around 2000 2001, and cellular had been established for a couple of decades already. So you imagine the great success of Wi-Fi that allowed this development to occur. There were various basic enhancements that started to be added after Wi-Fi came out, and there's a certain process where IEEE will then introduce amendments. And so here's an example of some of these. 802.11i is an important one for our course today because it's about security. Physical layer amendments we will talk about in this course as well. And anyway, so there's a certain process where these amendments get introduced, and later some of them get rolled into the main base specification.